This presentation discusses the proposed revisions for the Constitution at Fort William Baptist Church in 2021. Part 1 will discuss an introduction to the Constitution. What is a Constitution? Although there are different formats constitutions can take, this presentation will center on the kind of constitution presently in place at Fort William Baptist Church. There are two elements to this kind of constitution. A constitution brings some kind of organization or body into existence. In other words, it constitutes or it creates it as an organization. The second major purpose is that it defines the general laws of governance. So when we think of the Constitution of Fort William Baptist Church, what are the two basic purposes? Well, it states how Christ establishes a church, and it states how Christ governs a church. So note that constitutions in some organizations are simply one page in length. Those kinds of constitutions only fulfill the first purpose, to bring the body into existence. A separate document exists to state its bylaws or governance. And often church constitutions combine the two. This kind of document is properly called an organization's constating documents, and that's what we have. Fort William Baptist Church's Constitution is a bi-part document. And don't get tripped up by this designation. Bi simply means two, and partite simply means party. Bipartite means that the Constitution has to meet requirements of two parties. In our case, the two parties are church and state. The Constitution must meet biblical requirements and the requirements of the government. In this document, two parties are stating what defines and what governs a church. And from the church's side, we are asking, what does Christ say constitutes a church? And how does Christ say a church should be governed? From the government side, we are asking, what does a Canadian federal or provincial government say constitutes a church? And how does the state say a church should be governed? In terms of existence, it is Christ himself that affirms or approves that a certain body is actually a church. He approves the existence. Not just any group of people or Christians who gather together can be called a church. We would note that he also determines how the church is governed. He must give approval for this by his word. Alternatively, we put documents together, submit it to the government, and they respond. They say, yes, you have formally been brought into existence as Fort William Baptist Church, and you meet our criteria for governing rules. But there is one main caveat here. We understand that the state does not form a church. Christ does. So Christ creates a church and brings it into existence. The government is simply recognizing what Christ has done. Whether the government exists or not, Christ is building his kingdom. This is apart from how any government in any country might look at a church. Interesting enough, in Canada, a charity must form itself first and then apply for registration, and so this fits with our conception of the formation of the church from a biblical standpoint. If an organization must meet both these requirements for church and state, what content is required in the Constitution? What does the church have to include? Both church and state require specific content to answer two questions. What is a church, and how is it governed? Christ requires that we answer these questions in a certain way, and those determine the biblical content that is included in the Constitution. The state requires that we answer these questions in a certain way as well. They want to see certain content. And so this criteria sets the general course for the specific content in the Constitution. If we want to understand what content is placed inside the Constitution, we can think inside these broad categories. However, when we get down to the nitty-gritty details about how to answer these two broad questions, both parties answer those by asking more specific questions. And so we have the two broad questions, and then we have specific questions. In other words, detailed content of the Constitution is largely determined by answers to specific questions. The interesting thing is that both church and state basically ask many of the same specific questions. Let's look at a few. What is your name? What is your purpose and why do you exist? What is your denominational affiliation? Do you have clearly defined membership? How does a person become eligible for membership? How is a person removed from membership? What are the responsibilities of members? What rules govern your members' meetings? Who makes decisions affecting the organization? Who are the trustees and how are they chosen? On the surface, all of these might appear to be questions that we as a church want answered. Yet I have intentionally listed questions that are asked by the government. They want answers to these. So it's important to notice the overlap. Given all this, however, it is also essential to grasp that the two parties, church and state, are asking the same questions, but for very, very different reasons. And that determines, again, the content of the Constitution. To illustrate this, I've laid out 5 examples. We will start with something simple. What is your name? Why does the state ask this question? Well, there are formal requirements governing what a charitable organization can be called. It has to reflect your charitable purpose, and you can't have the same name as another charitable organization. But why does the church ask this question? Well, we want the name of our church to reflect our beliefs. We are a Baptist church, and we're not an Anglican or Lutheran or Presbyterian. And we want people who come to our church to know our scriptural beliefs. So notice that the same question is being asked for different reasons. Article 1, we declare our name. Example number 2 is, what is your purpose? Why does the state ask this question? Well, the government wants to know if our purpose falls under the category of a charitable organization. Ours is advancement of religion. In other words, they want to know how to tax us and what laws apply. But why does the church ask this question? Well, Christ's purpose should be our purpose. Whatever Scripture says, that should be our purpose. Article 2 of the Constitution states our aim or our purpose. And here we have 2 purposes, the advancement of the Christian religion, and then a more detailed account of our purpose to praise, prize, and proclaim Christ. The government mandates that the clause about advancement of religion be included in our Constitution in order to categorize us for taxation and governments. And we as a church have a more complete answer to this question, prizing, praising, and proclaiming. But you can see that the same question is being asked for very different reasons, and the answer is blended between what the government requires and the church. Example number 3, what is your denominational affiliation? Why does the state ask this? Well, the government wants to ensure that your affiliates are qualified donees. That is, your organization can legally transfer money to these affiliates. Why does the church ask this question? Well, we as a Baptist church believe in local church governance, that God has granted authority to the local church to govern itself. However, we also believe in a wider church association. Scripture sets an example for connectionalism with a broader body of churches. And Article 4 states our affiliation. Again, the main thing to notice is that the same question is being asked for very different reasons. Looking at example number 4, what are the rules governing membership? Eligibility, removal, responsibilities, and rights? Some people find it odd that the government would want to know this. Well, why does the state ask this question? The government wants to ensure that no member gains financially from a registered charity. And so they want organizations to keep track of members, as well as records of monetary exchange. There are other reasons, but that's just one. But why does the church ask this question? Well, in order to be a member, you need to make a confession of faith and have a life to match. You need to be in agreement on the gospel with the local church. The church has to authorize your membership, confirm that you're a right confessor with the right confession. Membership involves baptism, the Lord's Supper, and we believe in regenerate church membership. We don't baptize infants. Membership involves responsibilities. It is a job or an office. And members are subject to removal by church discipline. Note again that the two parties are asking the same question, but for very different reasons. And so when we turn to the final example, what rules govern members' meetings? How are decisions made? Who has authority? Well, why does the state ask this? Again, no member can benefit privately, and they want to ensure that there's enough built-in accountability against fraud. But why does the church ask this question? Well, we as a Baptist church want to know how Christ declares that we should be governed. In Scripture, we see that Christ has ultimate authority over the church. He also has given authority to the local congregation to vote members in and out, to elect elders and deacons and remove them, to vote on core documents and vote on significant issues. As well, there is elder authority. Elders are given the authority to lead and to teach. Again, you can see the same questions are being asked for different reasons. So returning to the idea of a bipartite document, the two parties are looking at the document in very different ways, and each require certain content. On the one hand, we are asking, what is the biblical teaching on how Christ creates a church and how he governs it? What does Scripture teach on these issues? On the other hand, the Constitution is looked at legally from the viewpoint of the government. So when thinking of specific content, either the same answer will suffice for both parties, or sometimes additional content is required for the same topic, and then sometimes separate content is required. By understanding these concepts, we can see further where responsibilities lie. It is the elder's job to exegete from Scripture the teaching on how Christ creates the church and how he governs the church. It is their responsibility to lead and to teach the congregation in these areas as they do in other areas. Their job is to prepare the base constitutional document that includes this teaching. On the other hand, it is mainly the trustees that help the church understand its legal responsibilities and ensure that those legal aspects are covered in the Constitution. In this way, the trustees work together with the elders in drafting the document prior to approval from the congregation. There are two final things to mention in this section. The first is approvals, and the second is categories within the Constitution. In terms of approvals, I do think we have Christ's approval that we are a church and we are biblically formed. We also are biblically governed, but some changes are required. In terms of the state, Fort William Baptist Church submitted its constitution constating documents to the government in 2011 and was approved and legally formed as a registered charity, having the permission to operate in Canada as such. The screenshot on the right is from the Canadian Revenue Agency's website. The Canadian Revenue Agency, CRA, is the arm of the government at the federal level that has been assigned to oversee charities. Once approved, we were assigned a business number, a charity type, advancement of religion, and assigned a category, Christianity. Regarding categories within the Constitution, there are 6 basic categories: general information, membership, government, administration. There are some concluding items, and then the appendices where you'll find the church covenant and the statement of faith. That is a basic overview of the structure of the Constitution for Fort William Baptist Church.